Welcome everybody to Beyond the Pink Door with your host, Paris Levin. On this special one-off podcast, I'll be discussing pinkwashing, neoliberalism, and how these two concepts intertwine with Israeli propaganda.
There is no magic pink door in the apartheid wall. We may be queer. I can show up at Ben Gurion airport and say, I'm lesbian, let me in. They're not going to do that because I'm Palestinian. So when you say gay friendly, which gay person are you talking about?
As a young Jewish lesbian, I believe I can provide an important perspective of intersectionality in terms of Judaism and queerness on Israeli occupancy. By specifically highlighting neoliberalism and pinkwashing, this podcast begins to untangle the web of lies Israel weaves to cover up its suppressive behaviors of Palestinian people.
As part of that rebranding, Israel is putting money and resources towards what activists that I'm involved with call a pinkwashing campaign, which is a campaign to promote the image that Israel is a safe haven for gay and lesbian people and a great anti-homophobic place. So it's done that by funding films that promote those ideas and sending them to film festivals. In the United States, it funds panels of gay and lesbian rights activists and leaders to go around the United States and give talks about how forward-thinking Israel is, how innovative Israel is on gay and lesbian rights issues.
Now, in terms of neoliberalism, let's look at how Jewish Voices for Peace, or what I like to call the good old JVP, Managing Director Tali Ben Daniel defines queerness and neoliberalism. In an excerpt from her work, Zionist Geographies, Neoliberal San Francisco, Pinkwashing, and Gay Palestine, they write, there are only very specific kind of individuals. Artistic, self-expressive, queer, they are seen as worthy of liberation. In my words, they're saying that a neoliberal queer person, a person whose individual strengths contribute to national betterment, are seen in the eyes of Israel as the only queer worthy of, what I'm going to use as her wording, liberation. You know who's not going to contribute to self-betterment in the eyes of Israel? Queer Palestinians. Now let's unpack this division between how Israel treats its queer Israelis and queer Palestinians. Selma, a queer Palestinian activist featured in this podcast's documentary footage of Pinkwashing Exposed, recounts their experience trying to eliminate pinkwashing's influence at a Seattle Pride event.
I'm also a queer Palestinian, and being queer and being Palestinian and being a daughter of a refugee and having a diasporic identity is deeply entrenched in my queer identity, and it cannot be separated. So I want to start off by saying that because I think a lot of queer people of color and a lot of queer people from non-Western societies feel invisibilized. And when we have these conversations, we're told, we could talk about occupation, we could talk about what's happening, but we're here to serve LGBT people, so let's just focus on that. So I just really want to say, I'm here, I'm gay, I live in Seattle, and I'm Palestinian. And I'm deeply concerned that this commission that I honor so much over the 7+ years that I've lived here has decided to partner with Stand With Us. I ask you today to be courageous and to cancel this event. And to cancel this event is not an act done solely. By canceling this event and saying we do not stand with actually the racist propaganda that's used to put on this event, you are actually standing in solidarity with so many other national and international groups that are saying we will not let our queer community be used as a ploy to cover war crimes against queer people, not just Palestinians, against queer people like me.
Now, do you think Selma's wishes for the event's cancellation were met? Absolutely not. The event's facilitators that they were meeting with immediately told them that they were planning on continuing the event. Now let's contrast that with an experience that just last year at my previous university I had. I was in a Hebrew class with the man who ran my Hillel group, and our final we were analyzing the film Kiss Me Before It Blows Up, which not only tokenized a Palestinian storyline of love with an Israeli woman, but it exemplified pinkwashing by making the face of its film a lesbian couple. Highlighting this, Israel seems happy to listen to queer voices when they aren't Palestinian. In America, there are only so many mainstream lesbian films. But this idea of seeing Israel as the face of queerness is really ironic, because Israel hasn't even legalized gay marriage. We see this constant image of Israel as a queer safe haven, which by now at this point in the podcast should begin to dissipate. Speaking of safe havens, It's now time to deconstruct Israel's settler colonialist roots.
Right? To me, there's no Israel and being Jewish are not the same thing, right? Like Israel's government, and it is a government that does a lot of things to maintain its regime, and those things are not things that all Jewish people are doing. They're just things that a particular government is doing. And in my opinion, Jewish people of conscience, just like everybody else, can see the violence happening in Palestine and oppose it.
It is so important for me as a Jewish person to discuss the humanitarian crisis in Palestine as related to the oppressive Israeli regime. Zionist ideology has infiltrated many Jewish spaces, including my synagogues growing up. We were taught that Israel's statehood's justified, almost brainwashed into believing that it's a great place, it's moral, it's for the Jewish people. We were taught anyone with issue as Israel as a country must have an issue with Judaism as a whole. However, unless one is blaming Israeli war crimes on the Jewish people, if someone's conflating all Jewish people with Israel, it'd be kind of like conflating current U.S. imperialist government with every single current settler who was descended from the European settlers who first came here. Though they are enacting settler colonialism, and their ancestors were the first to steal their land, their ethnic identity isn't to blame for their current government's upholding of the ideology of settler colonialism. Conflating Judaism with Zionism and seeing anti-Zionism as inherently anti-Semitic actually spawns more anti-Semitism and Jewish separatism. Just search Jew on Twitter right now. No, I'll give you time. Now, since we are nearing the end of our intro episode on pinkwashing, it's time to give this episode's Palestinian voices to listen to. As in order to liberate Palestine, we must give power to their people. Especially because I'm a white person, I want to make sure I'm not speaking over Palestinians and have their voices be just as heard as mine, if not more so. First up on our list, we got 3 today, is Let's Talk Palestine, which is an Instagram account that shares a lot of those, aesthetically pleasing infographics on issues in Palestine, which I know Instagram infographics not always a great source, but I personally like this account because, one, it's from a Palestinian sourced person group, and so I think inherently it has to come from an anti-colonialist and anti-capitalist lens, as well as people like me with ADHD. Sometimes we need something a little simpler to grasp these really hard conflicts and comprehend these issues, so I think in that case, great place to start. And also, they have a link tree in their bio with further information. So again, that's at Let's Talk Palestine on Instagram. Next up is the Palestinian Youth Movement, which, to quote from their website, is a transnational, independent grassroots movement of young Palestinians dedicated to the liberation of their homeland and people. In layman's terms, it's a collective of young Palestinians in exile from mainly the US and Canada, as well as some in Palestine. And again, according to their website, they hold workshops for Palestinian youth, they initiate grassroots and community-based on-ground organizing, and they also participate in events and conferences and panels that are meant to discuss decolonization to bring a Palestinian perspective. On their website, they have a donation link, and on their website, they have links to their Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Our last little group is the Claremont Students for Justice in Palestine, which I included because I'm assuming most people listening to this podcast are from the Claremont schools, as this podcast was created from a project from a class at the Claremont schools. The Claremont SJP has an Instagram. I mean, it's made by college students. And on their Instagram, they have a list of events, as well as, if you look back, they say that they meet on Tuesdays. And some events that they did, for example, were a Palestinian film festival, a leftist barbecue. I'm looking right now. They also had a 101 discussion on what going on in Palestine. And great if you want to do some up close and personal instead of going on the internet to do your work. Well, that marks the end of this episode. Again, I'm your host, Paris Levin. I am a queer, Jewish, femme, anti-Zionist. We'll see if this podcast goes. New Year. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good day, and please, please, please continue to work on decolonizing our minds as settler colonists. It's our job to get the justice back in the world.